High in the jagged peaks of the Himalayas, the wind howled like a wounded creature, sweeping through the icy cliffs with a fury that could strip skin from bone. Snow fell in relentless sheets, blinding and thick, coating the treacherous mountainside in a suffocating silence. It was in this unforgiving wilderness, where survival teetered on a knife's edge, that the tiny form of life first moved. It was no larger than a house cat, drenched and trembling, its spotted coat camouflaged against the blanket of white. A snow leopard cub, barely old enough to walk without stumbling, was clinging to a ledge just inches wide. Its pale blue eyes, wide with panic, scanned the drop below, a vertical fall that disappeared into a void of swirling frost and jagged rock. Somewhere above, far beyond its reach, was the den it had called home, now lost in the blizzard. The cub mewled weakly, its cries swallowed by the storm. It had slipped during a game of chase with its siblings, unaware of the fatal drop nearby. Its mother had searched, calling through the darkness, but the storm had torn their voices apart. Now it was alone, utterly, devastatingly alone, in a world that showed no mercy. And then the cliff gave way. The snow beneath its fragile paws crumbled, and the cub fell. It wasn't a long fall, but it was violent. The young body slammed into rock and ice, tumbling down the slope like a broken doll. When it finally came to a stop, it didn't move. Blood mixed with snow. Its breath came in shallow gasps, each one slower than the last. Miles below, at the base of the range, a man named Ravi had just lit the fire in his mountain outpost. A ranger and researcher, Ravi had dedicated his life to protecting endangered wildlife. He knew the sounds of the mountains like the back of his hand, the distant rumble of snowpack, the warning cries of birds, the eerie silence that preceded danger. But what he heard that day wasn't any of those things. It was a scream. Short, sharp, fading into the wind like a ghost's whisper. It didn't belong to any human, but it wasn't the cry of an adult animal either. It was too desperate, too broken. Ravi's stomach tightened. He grabbed his radio, his medpack, and his coat. The storm was worsening by the second, but something in his chest told him he didn't have time to wait. He radioed in a quick message, just in case, and plunged into the snow. Up the ridge, step by agonizing step, Ravi climbed. The snow whipped at his face, the cold clawed into his bones. He knew he might be walking into nothing, into death even, but he couldn't ignore that cry. Not out here, not in his forest.
It took him over an hour.
And just when he thought he'd gone mad chasing a sound that didn't exist, he saw it. A splash of red against white. A motionless body curled awkwardly near a stone outcropping. Ravi dropped to his knees, brushing the snow aside with his bare hands. He gasped. A cub, a snow leopard cub, barely breathing, its eyes fluttered, glazed with pain. One of its legs was twisted at a sickening angle. Its chest rose in shallow, jerky movements. It was dying. Ravi's hands trembled as he opened his medpack. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Hold on, little one. Please, just hold on." He didn't know if the cub could be saved. He didn't know if it would survive the descent, the night, or even the next breath. But he knew this. He wasn't leaving it behind. Ravi's boots crunched through the snow as he cradled the cub against his chest, shielding its broken body from the biting wind. The little one had stopped making sounds, but Ravi could still feel the faintest rise and fall of its ribcage. Each shallow breath was a race against time. The snow leopard cub, an animal so rare that even seasoned researchers could go decades without a live sighting, was now nestled inside Ravi's coat, its blood seeping through the fabric, mixing with melting frost. Every step down the mountainside was a battle. The storm didn't let up. Visibility was nearly zero, and the trail he'd carved on the way up was already disappearing beneath fresh powder. He slipped more than once. Rocks hidden beneath snow tore at his knees. Tree branches whipped his face, but he never loosened his grip on the cub. By the time Ravi burst through the door of his outpost, he was half frozen, soaked and panting. He slammed the door shut against the storm and dropped to his knees beside the fireplace. Gently, he peeled back his coat and stared down at the tiny creature. The cub's eyes were closed, its face contorted in pain. The front leg was definitely broken. There were cuts along its back, one deep enough to concern him. But what frightened him most was the stillness, the way the cub didn't flinch when he touched it. It had stopped reacting. "No," Ravi whispered, brushing the fur from the cub's face. "You made it this far. Don't stop now." He moved quickly, pulling clean gauze and antiseptic from the supply chest. His hands shook. He wasn't a veterinarian, he was a ranger. His training was in tracking, in field survival, in conservation. But that night, none of that mattered. He had to become a healer.
He worked in silence, dressing the wounds, stabilizing the leg with a splint made from carved wood. He wrapped the cub in thick towels and placed it near the fire. The flames cast flickering shadows across the room, dancing over the tiny rise and fall of its chest. Ravi sat beside it, refusing to sleep, his eyes never leaving the animal.
At one point in the night, the cub stirred. A weak, rattling sound left its throat. Not a growl, not a cry, just a sound of life. Its eyes blinked open, dull and unfocused, and met his. That moment, brief as it was, pierced something in Ravi. This wasn't just a wild animal anymore. This was a creature that had fought with everything it had to stay alive. It had survived a fall, a storm, and now lay in the arms of a human it didn't understand, and yet didn't fear. The hours dragged on. Ravi barely moved. He placed small drops of warm water on the cub's lips, hoping it might drink. Around dawn, it finally did. Just a single sip, but enough to ignite a spark of hope in Ravi's chest. He named it Nira, a name meaning light in an ancient language. It felt right. She was a sliver of light in this frozen wilderness, a survivor, a fighter. But Ravi knew that her battle wasn't over.
The nearest wildlife rescue center was 2 days away by vehicle, and the roads completely snowed in. Helicopter rescue was impossible in weather like this. If Nira was going to survive, she would have to do it here, with him, until help could arrive.
And yet, as the storm finally began to ease and the first weak rays of sunlight crept through the frosted windows, Ravi couldn't help but feel something shift. Nira, impossibly, was getting stronger. Each hour she moved a little more. Her breathing evened out. Her eyes stayed open longer, watching him. She didn't cower, she didn't growl. When he placed his hand near her head, she leaned toward it. It was quiet, intimate, sacred. But then just after midday, Ravi stepped outside to check the weather and spotted something in the snow that made his blood run cold. Tracks, massive, deep, fresh. They didn't belong to any snow leopard or any prey animal. There was something else in the mountains, something hunting, and it was close. Ravi crouched low near the doorframe, his breath fogging in the frigid air as he studied the tracks. They circled his cabin once, then vanished into the tree line. But he knew what he saw. Claw marks, deep, deliberate, too large for a lynx, too heavy for a fox. His heart pounded as his instincts, honed by years in the wild, whispered one word: predator. He stepped back inside, bolting the door behind him. Nira lifted her head from her nest of blankets, her pale eyes alert. The improvement in her condition was undeniable. She had begun shifting positions on her own, dragging herself toward the warmth of the fire. Her breathing was steady now, and the worst of the swelling in her broken leg had gone down. But she was still fragile, still helpless. And if something was out there, following her scent... Ravi pulled down the rifle from above the mantel. It was old, rarely used, but clean and loaded. He didn't want to use it, not unless he had no choice. He placed it beside the fire, within arm's reach, and sat down beside Nira. "I've got you," he murmured, his hand resting gently on her back. "Whatever's out there, it's not getting through me." Night fell fast.
The storm had passed, but the cold remained, wrapping the outpost in an eerie silence. No wind, no movement, just the occasional crackle of the fire and Naira's soft, sleeping breaths. Ravi didn't rest. He sat on the floor, his back against the wall, rifle beside him, eyes fixed on the door.
It wasn't until well past midnight that it happened. A sharp noise, wood splintering. Ravi bolted upright, grabbing the rifle and stepping carefully toward the back of the cabin. Another crash followed, this time from the outside storage shed. His heart raced. Whatever it was, it had returned, and it was bold. He flicked on the external light. For a brief moment, he saw it. A shadow, huge and low to the ground, lurking near the tree line, its eyes glowing faintly in the reflection of the beam. It was no ordinary animal. It wasn't afraid. It was watching, waiting. Then it vanished into the dark. Ravi stayed up the rest of the night, ears tuned to every sound. By morning, fresh tracks confirmed it had circled again, and this time they came right up to the window where Naira lay. As dawn painted the snow in soft gold, Ravi made a decision. He couldn't wait for help anymore. The creature, whatever it was tracking Naira. Maybe it had been the one that injured her in the first place. Maybe it saw her as a threat, or maybe as prey. But if he stayed in this cabin much longer, he'd be trapping her. "I won't let you die here," he whispered, kneeling beside her. Naira looked at him, her eyes filled with something far deeper than instinct. She trusted him. She was his responsibility now. He packed quickly, thermal blankets, high-calorie rations, water, medical supplies. He secured Naira inside a large padded carrier fashioned from gear he normally used to haul equipment. It was the only way to transport her safely. As he slung the makeshift sled behind him, tying it to a harness across his chest, Ravi knew the path ahead would be brutal. It was a 20-mile trek to the ranger station, through snow, ice, and whatever was out there stalking them. But he wasn't turning back. With one last look at the cabin, Ravi stepped into the snow, dragging the sled behind him. Hour after hour, they moved. The landscape blurred into endless white and grey, trees looming like silent sentinels. His breath burned in his lungs, his legs screamed with every step. But he didn't stop, not even when he saw the tracks again, closer this time, fresh. The predator was still out there, still watching. And then, somewhere deep in the trees behind them, came a sound that turned his blood to ice, a low growl, followed by a scream, not a human one. Naira jerked inside the sled, alert. Ravi froze. He turned slowly, and locked eyes with something he never expected to see again. For a heartbeat, Ravi couldn't move. There, emerging slowly from the tree line like a shadow given form, stood a fully grown snow leopard. Not just any wild animal, but an adult, massive and scarred, with a limp in one leg and piercing eyes fixed straight on the sled. Naira's eyes widened. She let out a faint sound, half growl, half whimper. Not fear, recognition.
Ravi's breath caught in his throat.
It couldn't be. The resemblance was undeniable, the same facial structure, same pale coat with dark grey rosettes. This wasn't just any predator. This was Naira's mother, but something was wrong. The big cat's movements were uneven, her frame gaunt, her ribs visible under her fur. She'd been struggling too. That scream he heard, it must have come from her, driven by pain or desperation. And now here they were, mother and daughter, face to face in a snowy standstill, with Ravi caught in between. He didn't dare move. The adult cat could kill him in seconds if she wanted to. But she didn't. She simply stood there, snow dusting her coat, eyes fixed on the sled. Her muscles were taut, not in a hunting stance, but protective. She hadn't come for a meal. She had come for Naira. Naira, still weak, pulled herself up inside the sled, She pressed her nose against the mesh, letting out a soft, rolling call, childlike, yearning. The big cat responded with a deep chuff, the kind only snow leopards make when greeting one another. Ravi slowly lowered his pack and removed his gloves. His fingers trembled, not from cold, but from adrenaline.
He could feel it.
This wasn't a threat.
This was a reunion.
The adult leopard inched forward, closing the space between them with cautious steps. Ravi remained still, watching, heart thudding in his chest. She didn't break eye contact until she reached the edge of the sled. And then, gently, she pressed her forehead against the fabric, nuzzling the tiny cub inside. Naira responded, pawing at the mesh, letting out tiny, broken cries. Ravi's chest tightened. It was more emotion than he thought possible from animals bred for solitude. He remembered what the sanctuary director had told him weeks ago about reports of a female snow leopard who had disappeared after a poaching attempt. No body was found, but her trail vanished in the higher ridges. Was this her? Was this the mother who had risked everything to protect her cub and been left behind, believed dead? Ravi's eyes burned. All this time he thought he was saving Naira. But now it felt like Naira was saving him, from the cynicism, from the numbness, from the belief that wild things couldn't feel the same grief and longing humans do. The wind picked up again, and Ravi made a decision. With slow, deliberate hands, he unfastened the sled's enclosure. Naira crawled forward, stumbling out into the snow. The mother didn't move, didn't flinch. She lowered herself to the ground as her cub approached, and in an instant they were pressed together, cheek to cheek, tails entwined. It was the kind of embrace Ravi had seen in humans 1,000 times, but never like this. He turned away, giving them a moment. Part of him wanted to keep Naira, wanted to believe he was the one who had given her a second chance. But that wasn't true. This was always her journey. Still, a part of him hesitated. The storm was coming back. The mountain wind howled through the trees. What if she was still too weak? What if the mother wasn't strong enough to protect her anymore? As if sensing his fear, the big cat looked at him again. She held his gaze for a long time.
Then she blinked, slowly. A sign of trust.
She knew, and somehow so did he. But just as Ravi began to feel peace wash over him, a new sound shattered the silence. Voices,
far away but approaching, echoing across the ridge.
Sanctuary staff, trackers. If they saw the mother, they might assume she was a threat. They might try to capture her, or worse. Ravi's blood ran cold. He had only minutes to decide what to do.
Ravi's instincts kicked in. He had to act fast.
He turned toward the ridge, trying to gauge how far the voices were. The sanctuary team was still a few minutes away, but they were closing in. If they reached the clearing and saw a full-grown snow leopard standing over a cub, the outcome would be disastrous. They wouldn't see the reunion. They'd see a threat. Ravi spun around and looked at the two animals, still curled together in the snow, their breathing sinking in silent rhythm. The mother licked Naira's fur gently, her eyes flicking to Ravi every so often, not with fear, but something closer to understanding, trust. And Ravi understood too. Naira had made her choice. She was never his to keep. He had been the bridge, not the destination. He dropped to his knees, yanked open his backpack and grabbed the emergency flare, normally used to signal helicopters in emergencies. He lit it. A sudden burst of red light hissed into the sky, crackling through the wind. It would draw the team's attention away from the ridge. If they followed the signal, they'd head toward the lower trail, far from where he stood. He watched the flare vanish into the clouds. Then, without hesitation, he turned back to the sled, snapped it shut, empty now, and began dragging it toward the other side of the clearing. The opposite direction of the mother and cub. He left tracks on purpose. Deep ones, enough to suggest he'd gone down into the valley. Let them find the sled. Let them believe the cub had been moved. Just let them not come here. By the time the voices got louder, Ravi had already disappeared into the trees, crouched low between frozen shrubs, his breath shallow. He waited. 2 rangers entered the clearing, panting, rifles slung over their shoulders. One of them shouted, "Ravi! Did you launch the flare?" He stayed silent. They scouted the edge, peering through binoculars, then caught sight of the sled's tracks. Just as he hoped, they followed the trail away from the true reunion site. Ravi didn't move until he was certain they were gone. When he crept back toward the tree line, the mother leopard was still there, still watching. But something had changed. She nudged her cub once, then looked up at him one final time. No sound, no movement, just that same quiet look, a thank you from a creature that could never say it aloud. Then slowly, gracefully, she turned and disappeared into the white forest, Naira following close behind. They never looked back. Ravi stayed standing there for a long time after they were gone, the wind tugging at his coat, the silence folding in around him again. But this time, it felt different. He had witnessed something rare. Not just survival, but something deeper.
Forgiveness.
Reunion, love. Back at the sanctuary, Ravi never told the full truth. When asked, he simply said, "She found her own way." And no one questioned it, because Naira was gone. Vanished into the wild like a ghost, and somehow that was enough. Weeks passed, then months, and just when the memory of that storm had started to fade into the snowdrifts of time, a photo came in. Trail camera footage from a remote ridge, taken by accident, a massive snow leopard.
And by her side, a younger one, stronger now, grown into her legs, her coat brighter, eyes sharper.
The team didn't recognize her, but Ravi did. And he smiled. Because love doesn't always stay, but when it does its job, it sets you free. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Sometimes the wild teaches us what it truly means to come home.